Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you all are doing good. Do subscribe, like, and follow the channel. The topic that we're going to discuss today is one of the very important artifacts of software design. So let's begin. The topic is use cases. Before going into the in-depth detail, let's first see a brief introduction of the use cases. The idea of use cases to describe functional requirements was introduced in 1986 by Ivar Jacobson. Jacobson was a main contributor to the UML and the UP. Writing use cases or the use case stories describing the way to actually use a particular system is an excellent and widely accepted way or technique to understand and describe the requirements of the system. So, in other words, a use case describes a series of user system interactions that helps the user to accomplish something. A use case diagram involves two main elements: use cases, or in other words, the system stories. Actors are the people or other system that interacts with the use cases. So a use case diagram is consists of two main elements: use cases and actors. A scenario. System scenarios are a sequence of actions or interactions between actors and the system that are performed to carry out a specific task. So, a scenario is also called a use case instance, which means a single use case can have multiple scenarios, as such as a successful scenario or maybe a failed scenario or an exceptional scenario. A detailed description of these scenarios is important in order to understand the system completely. A single scenario is one story of using the system. However, a single use case can have multiple scenarios. It is one story of the using the system. So here I have a very brief or particular use case, ATM withdrawal. So the withdrawal use case have sequence of 10 actions that an actor needs to perform in order to withdraw the cash from the ATM. However, if we look closely into the steps or the sequence of the actions that are being performed by the end user, we can easily find out that the fourth action, which is assuming that the pin is correct, which is entered by the user, but actually that pin result in different scenarios in real life, such as the pin could either be correct or wrong. Then of course, in case of the wrong entered pin, there is a limit of the tries that a user can have to try her pin. Use cases. Use cases may have diagrams associated with them, and a use case diagram is an easy way for an analyst to discuss a process with the subject matter expert. Moreover, a use case diagram is widely used to have an understanding of the system at a very basic level. Use case diagram is actually recommended by many designers because of the positive impact of visualization. Each use case represents a particular story or a set of stories or cases to use the system in order to carry out a special or specific task. Remember that use cases does not depict the requirements of the system. Instead, they are merely illustrating the system requirements in the use case scenarios or stories. The key point to remember here is use cases are primarily texts. The text is important, the scenario is important, the actions taken by the user are important, enlisting them is important, but the diagram is optional, but it's recommended. So a diagram is always recommended in the case of the use cases. The question arises, why do we actually need the use cases? Why do we actually need to write such long stories and the scenarios? What are the benefits of having these use cases at all in the first place? So the very core reason is no system exists in isolation. That means no system at all exists completely on its own. One way or another, all the systems are relying on pre-designed libraries, APIs, or even external systems as well. So, in order to have a clear representation of these interactions, we take the help from the use cases. Secondly, the use cases provide notations, visual notations to help show the interaction between the system and its actors. Thirdly, the use cases are used to specify the behavior of the system. Also, the use cases present an abstract visualization of the system and what the system is supposed to do, and the interaction of the system with its actors. Use case notations. Following are some widely accepted notations used to draw a basic use case diagram of a system. In use case diagram, an actor is represented by a stick person figure like shown here. The name of the actor is written beneath or along the stick figure. A use case is represented by an oval shape or an ellipse. The name of the use case is normally written inside the oval shape, but it can also be written right beneath the shape as well. There are several types of relationships that may appear in use case diagrams, such as association, generalization, include and exclude relations. We are going to discuss these relations one by one in the next slides. So let's begin. So relationship in use case diagram, the first type of the relationship is association between an actor and a use case. Actors are connected to the use cases with which they interact by a line that represents a relationship between that particular use case and the actor. This particular diagram represents that an actor who is the customer of the system, he can withdraw the cash from the system. Of course, this particular use case will have a whole text scenario, which will show which will be enlisting a whole set of actions. The use case text will contain the sequence of actions and different possible scenarios for the cash withdrawals, etc. The second type of the relationship in the use case diagram is an association between two actors. Actors in the use case diagram can have association relationships as well. In this figure, both customer and administrator are users of the system. However, they both have different set of responsibilities, or they both are different users in this form of in nature. Some of the use cases of both customer and administrator will be similar, but on the other hand, some very core use cases of both of these customer and administrator will be different from each other. All the use cases associated with the user represents the common use cases of both customer and administrator. And hence, all the use cases that are associated with the user will be applicable for both customer and the administrator. The dissimilar use cases or the core responsibilities which are different for both customer and administrator will have a straight relationship with them, or the straight association with customer and administrator respectively. So we can simply say dissimilar use cases will have association with either the customer or the administrator, and hence will only be applicable to the respective one. Relationships in use case diagram. The third type of the relationship is association between two use cases. So use case in use case diagram can also have different relationships with each other, such as generalization, include, or extend relations. So let's see an example. So a generalization between two use cases has been shown in this figure. Sometimes it becomes apparent that there is more than one variant of a use case and each has some actions in common, and some actions are unique to each of the use cases. So for example, in this particular diagram, cash withdrawal, transfer, and the balance inquiry, all of these are a type of transactions, but all of these have some unique set of actions, but all of these also have some set of actions which are same for all of these. Customer needs to authenticate themselves with the help of their PIN or the passwords, or maybe their credit card, in order to perform any of these transactions. So this authentication step is similar for all of these three transactions, but however the transaction process is different in all of these three. Let me explain you it a bit further. So in this case we can have a generalized use case and its specialized version as shown here. So the generalized case is the transaction and the specialized cases are cash withdrawal, transfer, and balance inquiry. So in this figure, all these three use cases are type of transactions. They are being generalized. Hence, they all require customer authentication. But all three vary in nature, such as cash withdrawal will be deducting the amount from the customer account, whereas on the other hand, balance inquiry will only be checking the amount available in the account. Here I have written down some differences and brief definitions of all the three types of relationships between use cases in use case diagram. So we have generalization, extend and include. So in case of the extend, the extending use case which is being extended from a particular use case is optional. So it may execute or it may not, but in case of the include, it's a must, it's not an optional. In case of generalization, the top case or the transaction case, the top one who's being generalized is an abstract use case. It may be a complete or it may be an incomplete use case. But in the case of the include, the top case use case must be abstract use case. That means the top use case will be an incomplete use case because for its completion, it needs the other use case to be executed, which is a must execution. And similarly, I have enlisted some other brief differences as well. Here we have a very brief use case diagram showing different components and their relations with another. So we have a system boundary shown by a rectangle. We have certain use cases such as place order, track order. We have actors such as the online customer, the clerk, and etc. And then we have associations between actors and the use cases from which we can safely or we can infer that an online customer can place his own order and a clerk can actually track that particular order. Here is a very basic use case diagram of the POS system which have different actors, and some of the actors are actual human entities whereas some other actors are the external software systems represented in the rectangle outside the system boundaries. Hope this lecture has helped you to understand the UML use cases, their importance, and the use case diagram. If you have any queries or topic requests, please feel free to comment them. Do subscribe, like, and follow the channel to get more interesting lectures. Allah Hafiz.